Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha. I am the content editor at Aragon, where we build modular DAO tools for protocols and organizations to govern their assets on-chain. So today, I'm going to be talking about future-proof governance and how that can enable future-proof protocols. So to kick us off, I'm going to talk a bit about the state of governance today. And in order to do that, I have to queue up my burning room. So DAOs today are undeniably having some struggles. There are a lot of people out there who say that DAOs don't work, members don't care enough to participate, voter apathy is off the charts, and DAOs are just facing a lot of headwinds in the current discourse today. And I believe that the reason that DAOs are running into these struggles and that there are a lot of doubters out there is that honestly, they just have a lack of reliable and secure governance options that fit their needs. And the same thing goes for members as well. Like, the members realize when the DAO is using a generic structure that doesn't work for their organization's unique and custom needs. I see most DAO structures today as the generic no-name coffee brand on the shelf. It's mostly just token voting with maybe a little bit of delegation sprinkled on top. But other than that, DAOs are pretty much using the same generic structure copy-pasted over and over again. And so that leaves DAO members to be sipping their generic coffee, sitting in the burning room. And using this type of cookie-cutter governance can cause a lot of problems, especially for large DeFi protocols when they're thinking about their governance. So some of these problems include holding back from decentralizing properly, because when you have the wrong on-chain governance, there's a ton of risk associated with that. So instead, protocols might stick with a trusted structure or just occasionally throw out a signaling vote, but actually decentralizing on-chain is risky. And another problem that they run into with cookie-cutter governance is that they end up using the same model throughout their life cycle. And that's a problem when you have different levels of protocol adoption, because when you start your protocol lifecycle, maybe you have a small group, 5 people, 10 people. You can govern that with a multi-sig pretty easily. But say you're 2 years down the line and you have thousands of users that want to participate in governance, you're going to need a totally different model. And using the same cookie-cutter structure is just not going to work. So why does every DAO out there not have a completely custom build, you might be wondering. But that's because custom governance builds have their fair share of problems as well. If you want to throw a ton of time right into the incinerator, you can go for that. Spend a lot of dev resources on building that custom structure. Take on a lot of risk because it's untested, maybe it hasn't been audited yet, all sorts of things like that. And a lot of custom governance builds are very experimental and theoretical rather than being grounded in the real needs of real DeFi protocols. So how can we make custom governance safer, easier, and faster to build? Our answer is to build on a modular DAO stack. So this makes customizing governance much, much easier. So this is one of the few things Bitcoin might not fix, but Aragon OS X actually does. So Aragon OS X is Aragon's new DAO framework, which we launched in 2023, actually about this time last year. So ETHDenver coming around for us. And here's how it works. So at the center of OS X, you have your DAO contract. That contract is built to be extremely lean and simple, and that makes it more secure and much easier to work with. Then within that DAO contract, you have a permission manager. And what the permission manager does is it manages permissions to external smart contracts. And those external smart contracts, which we call plugins, the light blue boxes below, those are the contracts that change the governance logic of your DAO. So most of your DAO's governance logic is actually customized through these plugins rather than inside of the contract itself. So plugins are really what will help DAOs build custom designs for their precise needs. So you can think of them kind of like apps that you install and uninstall on your computer, because when you want to use a new one, you grant it permission through your governance process to perform certain actions. And then when you don't want to use that governance plugin anymore, you just uninstall it via your governance process. So maybe that's passing a vote, or if you have a multi-sig setup, it could be just approving a transaction. And the plugin model is safer because you're making changes to the plugins, not to the DAO vault itself. Everything is happening externally, and the vault where you keep your assets is untouched. And on top of that, you can also manage access control with extreme precision using the plugins, because say you have a treasury management sub-DAO, and you want them to be able to manage your DAO's assets so you can grow your treasury, but you really don't want them to have full access to the treasury and to be able to perform any action. You can use OSX to give them granular permissions rather than a complete blanket, do whatever you want permission. Plugins are also easy to work with because you track permissions via plugins rather than having to track them scattered across an entire DAO deployment. So if you want to make changes, everything that you need to be aware of is front and center rather than tangled up in a lot of other things. And the plugin model is also fast because you can just take advantage of the fact that they're open source. You can fork, reuse plugins. There are plugins built by the Aragon team, plugins built by open source developers, and you can use these projects rather than starting over from scratch every time. So now that you have an idea of what OSX is and how plugins work, I'm going to share a few examples of how you can put plugins together to create completely unique and powerful custom governance designs. So the first one is multi-chain governance. So we live in a multi-chain world, tons of L2s. I feel like it is L2 season these days. And so we created multi-chain governance so that you could govern assets and permissions for a protocol across EVM chains from a single mainnet Ethereum DAO smart contract. So imagine you have a protocol that has that is deployed on Arbitrum, on Base, on Polygon. You can use multi-chain governance to govern all of those parameters or govern all of those assets deployed across those chains. So how it works is you create a custom census with tokens across chains using Layer 0's omni-chain fungible token standard. So you have those Polygon governance tokens, those Arbitrum governance tokens. Just wrap them in an OFT, and then you can bring all of that voting power into one census. Then those members can cast votes for a low cost on ZK Sync, save a ton of money there. And then if that vote passes, that action that you programmed into the proposal can be executed across chains simultaneously using the Aragon OSX permission management system. So here's why multi-chain governance works so well on Aragon OSX. To start, the permission management system is flexible enough to add the cross-chain condition using Layer 0. Also, we have an unopinionated protocol design. This is extremely important in a world where there are tons of chains, and we don't know what next year is going to look like when it comes to where most of DeFi action, DAO action is going to be happening. So the unopinionated protocol design means that our protocol can be deployed across chains very easily. Then the replicable plugin system means that you don't have to rebuild your plugins every time you want to deploy on a new chain. You just reuse one that you already have. And finally, the strong base plugin contracts make it so that most of the logic is already handled inside of those plugin contracts when you're building your new custom plugin. Another example, optimistic dual governance. So this is when DAOs create two separate stakeholder groups with different governance permissions and then execute proposals optimistically. So I'll walk you through it. It starts by an address on a proposal allow list, creating a proposal to the main DAO. So you can imagine these down here, these pink boxes, like sub-DAOs or maybe DAO members' wallets or multi-sigs that represent a service provider that, for example, is maybe trying to provide a service to your DAO. So they're on the proposal allow list. They create a proposal to the main DAO, which then enters the plugin, and that begins the time lock period. During the time lock period, the main DAO can veto the proposal. So the main DAO can be an allow list of a different group of addresses. It can be token holders. It can be NFT holders, whatever you want. If the proposal is not vetoed during that time lock period, then it automatically can be executed. So that means you don't have to pass a vote. That's the optimistic piece of it. And the cool thing about this model that I really like is that you don't need token-based governance to use this model. You can have one allow list on the propose end and then another allow list on the veto end, and no token is required. So why optimistic dual governance works on Aragon OS X? Well, it comes back to the granular permission management that I've been talking about. So here we use it to separate groups, give them different governance permissions, but allow those groups to still exist in the same umbrella DAO. So you don't have to be deploying a million different DAOs. You have one organization with sub-organizations inside of it, all completely on-chain. So what is this all up to? And for me, it's really making governance future-proof and adaptable. So future-proof governance is governance that can withstand whatever the world throws at it. We live in a time when we don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now, 1 month from now, 1 week from now. Everything is changing all the time, and I think if you've made it in crypto this long, you probably agree. So if we don't decentralize our governance now, protocols will be fragile. They'll be fragile to attack and censorship, especially as more and more people enter the space and more large nation states become aware of crypto, like, to be entirely honest. So we need future-proof governance, and we need it now. Future-proof governance is what will underpin truly resilient DAOs, and it's what enables them to adapt and change when the world around them does. So that's what we're doing here at Aragon. If any of this is interesting to you, if you would like to build a custom DAO, scan that QR code. It leads to a form where you can input some interest, share about your project, your protocol, and we'll be back in touch about how we can build a custom DAO for you. So thank you.